On today's show, we'll discuss Gary Bettman's comments on the income tax state debate and what's the latest with the Maple Leafs and their roster decisions. That's all coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti. Thank you, everyone, those everydayers who are subscribed to us and taking the podcast each and every day. Just a reminder that although the Leaf season's over, the podcast is not. We take this bad boy all the way through the offseason, through the draft, free agency, and even through the literal offseason of the summer. So it's 365 here on the Locked On Leafs podcast. What's happening, Dave? How are we feeling on a Wednesday?
Feeling pretty good. You know, it's kind of weird that we won't have a game to talk about till Thursday.
Yeah, I mean, it very strange. Like 2 days in between games 2 and 3. That makes sense because of the travel. But then another 2 days in between game 3 and 4. Like, I don't
very
really
NBA-esque.
Yeah, like I don't know why. Like we complain that the season goes too long, and then they pull crap like this. Like no wonder there's a tight turnaround between the end of the playoffs and the draft and free agency. It's because you do stupid stuff like this. Like, what's the point? Let's get these games going and let's finish up the series. Like, although I do love obviously what we've seen. It's been good hockey and. I don't know. The game the other night was great hockey by the Edmonton Oilers, but like I want it to go 7, but I don't need it to be a 3-4 week process here. Like let's 2 games, right? Game day, off day, game day, off day, game day. Like you can wrap this thing up in less than 2 weeks if you really want.
Yeah, like you're getting the extra break with travel, but like. If the NHL wants to figure out why maybe the ratings aren't as high at times, people are just like we want to get on with the next phase here, right? We don't need the Stanley Cup being awarded on like June 20th.
Yeah,
like last year it was like Stanley Cup's awarded. Oh, by the way, in like 3-4 days you got the draft.
Yeah.
Right.
Real tight turnaround. It is, especially for the teams that win. Like you don't really even have a chance to celebrate. You got the draft. Like if you're management, you got the draft coming up the next day or in a couple of days. You got to get ready with those meetings, and then you somehow need to make it to this cup parade, and they've got free agency to get to. I'm telling you, man, like the NHL needs to figure out a way where they can have this thing wrapped up by, I don't know, in the teens. Have it done before June 20th for the cup to last until like the 24th or something is just not needed. You don't need it. Like if we could wrap this thing up first week of June going forward, I think that'd be best case scenario for the league and its viewers. But the TV contracts negate that from happening. Speaking of like league-wide news, by the way, did you happen to catch Gary Bettman's comments the other day on TNT about the income tax debate? Would you like to enlighten the people of what I'm referring to? And then we could touch on those comments ourselves.
Yeah. So first off, kudos to Paul Bissonnette because he went right after Gary Bettman on that one. Like he put himself in the line of fire, and like sometimes you don't see those questions being asked of Bettman live. Like sometimes you get maybe in a press conference, but like this one was just like he flat out he didn't even let Biz finish the question. He called it ridiculous, ridiculous issue, and his reasoning behind it was when the Florida teams weren't.
What was the question? What was the question, Dave? For those who didn't hear it, what was the question? Let's give some context first.
So first, he's kind of like, is there a competitive imbalance with the, lack of the state, no state tax teams that have, obviously had a lot of success.
Yeah.
And should the
Do they
league
have
be
cap
doing something?
advantages in a cap era? Do
Yeah.
they have that added advantage during the
Will,
cap era?
will the league consider trying to balance things out? Essentially, like, would they implement something to allow for a better competitive balance? And Bettman's like, well, when the Florida teams weren't good, which was about for 17 years, nobody said anything about it. For those of you who play, who were you? Obviously, he was talking about Biz. I think Carter, Anson Carter was on.
Yeah,
he's like, were you sitting there with the tax table? No. And I'm like, and he also says, he also brought up like, okay, state taxes are higher in Los Angeles, high in New York. What are you going to do? Subsidize those teams? I like listen to that comment. Like, what are you talking about, Gary? Like, that's not the issue. The issue is that you look at the teams that have gone to the Cup final or have won the Cup in like the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
Majority have been the ones with no state income tax. In a time where the salary cap hasn't, obviously now the next 2 years we're going to see a big rise in the salary cap, but for the longest time it's a very flat cap.
Yeah. And I think that's part of it too. Like Bettman says, oh, last 17 years, no one said nothing. And it's like, well, that's not completely true, I suppose. But prior to COVID, I don't think that, first of all, the first few years that both these teams were around, there was no cap. For the first decade they were there. The cap era didn't come until 2005, 2006, right? And yes, there were bleak years for both of those teams, in the decade after that, for sure. Teams really needed to figure out how to maneuver in the cap era. But where I think it really became a benefit was during COVID when the cap didn't rise, like you said. And at that point, teams were really penny pinching and didn't have the opportunities to go out and bring guys in and sign guys to lucrative contracts. But the Florida Panthers were able to do that. The Tampa Bay Lightning were able to do that. The Vegas Golden Knights have been able to do that. And these non-income tax states, they're allowed to do it because at the end of the day, Dave, I don't know about you, but as long as I'm taking home the same amount of money, whatever my actual total salary is, doesn't matter. As long as the take home pay is the same, and the take home pay is more in Florida if you sign the same contract in Florida or any of these other income tax states than is in Toronto, or it is in New York, or it is in LA, or Massachusetts if you're in Boston, like wherever. Like there's different tax brackets in every city almost. But here's where I think we look at it and the issue lies is simply this. If the Maple Leafs, right, they want to sign a guy to a $10 million contract, right? And for that, if you sign, actually, let's use Mitch Marner as a perfect example, because this is going to be a conversation coming up for sure over the next, few weeks as he leads into free agency. If he were to come back to Toronto, let's just throw out the number 12.5. Okay, $12.5 million. If he were to sign that in Toronto, his take-home pay after taxes, because remember, in Toronto, you're paying taxes, and it's was it 53.2% tax at that tax bracket of a $13 million annual salary. You're paying 53.2% tax. So your take-home pay after that, if you're Marner in Toronto, is your tax is 6.9 million. Your take-home is 5.85. But you could sign the exact same contract in Florida, 12.5 million. You're not taking home 5.85. Now all of a sudden you're taking home $7.91 million. That's over $2 million more by signing the contract. Exact same cap number, exact same AAV. So when you talk about, it going against the cap, the league-wide cap, it's the same number, but it's a different take-home pay. So realistically, if Marner says, okay, I'm willing to sign in Toronto at 12.5 because I think 5.85 is a good take-home number for me, well, he can sign in Florida for about $10 million and have the same take-home pay, but the Panthers will end up with that $2.5 million tax cut in cap cuts. And when you do that with 3 or 4 players, like they've been able to do with the Verhagis of the world and the Sam Reinharts of the world, and probably gonna do the same thing with Sam Bennett and maybe Aaron Ekblad if they come back, is 2 million here, 2 million there. All of a sudden, you do it with 4 players. That's an extra $8 million you have to sign a player. And you could get a great bona fide top line winger at that price, top 6 contributor at that price. But Reinhardt signed for 8.6. You can nearly get another Reinhardt in Florida just by having that advantage on 3 or 4 other big contracts. That's where this advantage to me really sticks out. And I'm with Biz. There definitely is a competitive advantage to it. I just don't know how they really go about changing it. I really don't know. Like, I don't have a solution for it, but it
They're not
doesn't sound
gonna
like
change it.
Bettman's even willing to discuss a solution.
No.
That's where the problem for me lies.
And he knows that if let's say like a luxury tax, right? Similar to what they have in the NBA, were to be implemented, then unless the Florida teams, and look, some of these Florida teams have, ownership that can pay a bit, right? Or, in Vegas, we know that Bill Foley is not going to be shy to take out the checkbook. Like, I know for a fact they don't want this to be a league where, the top teams will continually spend and potentially overspend on free agents, just for the sake of, having the best potential team, right? I don't think it's as big of a deal as maybe it is in like MLB. Like MLB is the worst at this, right? Look at what the Dodgers pay. Look what the Mets pay. Look at some of these top teams, what they're paying for their players. That's because there's the, what do they call it now? The competitive tax or the I can't remember what
balance. Yeah, whatever it is. Yeah, competitive balance tax. I think.
Like they're not afraid to pay it because guess what? In the end, they're gonna be probably in the mix, one of the top teams,
right?
And like it's a drop.
I don't know if that. I don't know if that's the solution. I suppose, like to take away, and I don't think that the players will ever get on board for that. I truly don't. But I wonder if, like, because apparently what is on the table is now they are going to find a way to get a playoff cap ceiling in there. So your roster that you're playing has to be cap compliant in the playoffs. That is going to be negotiated in the next CBA. So there's a change that moving forward that has been controversial that they're willing to make a change for. This one, they just seem less willing to do so. And I'd imagine it's because like they deep down don't really have a fair solution. I mean, the only possible thing you could even do realistically is like, I mean, the only way to make it, I guess, literally fair is for every team to have their own salary cap based on the state that they're in. Like, that's the only way to do it. But then you get into, okay, well, what if a player gets traded? Like, he's guaranteed that money, those contracts. You can't. It has to be blanket all across the league, or it's going to throw everything out of whack. So that's ultimately the biggest problem when it comes to it. It's so difficult to police, and it's just there's no. I don't think no one has come up with a perfect solution for it yet, I think is the problem. But I think we can all agree that there is certainly a competitive balance. And when you look at the 6 teams who do play in no income tax states, that's Dallas, that's Tampa, Florida, Vegas, and Seattle, and Nashville. Like, yes, Nashville and Seattle, not great teams, but hey, Nashville went spending last year. They're able to go and bring some guys in, and I guarantee you part of it was the fact that their take-home pay was a lot better than what it'd be elsewhere. They've got some nice players out there who've taken some decent, cuts on their contract. I think you could say so. Ryan O'Reilly, decided to take $4.5 million in Nashville as opposed to taking $4.5 million in Toronto. Part of it was because he didn't want to play in Toronto, but again, same thing with Marner. The take-home pay at $4.5 million in Tennessee compared to Toronto is vastly different. It's the exact same as it would be in Florida. It's the same competitive balance. So it's like, okay, I can sign for 4.5 here, and my take-home pay is going to be this much. If that's all the lease we're offering me, I can make way more money by playing over there. And Nashville, pretty nice city. Yeah, it's an interesting conundrum, I guess, the NHL finds themselves in. Doesn't sound like there's going to be any clarity on it anytime soon, though.
No, and again, like they've done their best to try to not make this a talking point, but this isn't something that just fans and media are talking about. Like players have also kind of brought it up by in a way as well. So
yeah. Well, I literally I remember last summer I was co-hosting Overdrive and we had Barry Trotz on air, and it was after he had the successful summer, right? They won the offseason. They signed Marchessault, they signed who they bring in Brady Shea, Steven Stamkos, and they went on a big old shopping spree last summer. And it was, hey, like, well, why were we able to have such success? And he alluded to the advantage being in a no income tax state. That's an advantage that they had that they're able to utilize in their pitch. He literally admitted to it to us on air. So we all know that it's out there, and it plays a role, but doesn't seem like it's going to change anytime soon. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, let's get to some cosign, no sign. Dave, there's a few things I want to throw at you. I'm excited what you got for me. That's coming up next here on the Locked On Leafs podcast.
Today's edition of Locked On Leafs podcast is brought to you by wonderful Pistachios. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. And, if you're a big fan of not having the mess or you want that perfect grab-and-go snack, go for the no-shell variety. It's great for a road trip, or if you just need a quick protein boost, it's always a go-to for myself. Or if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are a classic favorite. And you can also look at the fact that, it's the grab-and-go ease. And honestly, it's like a snack meditation. So get cracking and snacking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more.
The Locked On Leafs podcast continues. Mike DiStefano, Dave Morassutti with you as we are each and every weekday, Monday through Friday, free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe to the show for daily Maple Leafs coverage, wherever you get your podcasts, and also on YouTube. All right, Dave, let's play some cosign, no sign. It's been a couple weeks since we played this, and for those who are new to the pod, welcome. Hopefully you're enjoying the content. Dave and I are going to make statements to each other, and if we agree with them, we're going to cosign it. If we do disagree, we'll no sign it, and we'll explain our positioning. All right, Dave, why don't you shoot off your first one for me?
The Matthew Knies extension is going to come sooner rather than later.
Well, that's what does that mean? That's a bit of a vague statement.
It will be done within the next couple of weeks.
So, like before the draft? Okay,
yeah.
So it'll be done before the draft. Oh, I will. Oh, that's that. The draft is interesting. Like for sure, I think July 1. I'm like the draft, like I'm just unsure if they're like heavily working on this deal right now, or if they're like, look, you know what? Actually, I'm going to co-sign it because the Leafs don't have a whole lot of draft picks. I think it's pretty much the real reason why. There's not a lot of draft picks. So, Brad Treliving probably doesn't have to be all that hot and heavy in the draft discussions, and he could be out there working the phones trying to find deals for Knies or Tavares or Marner or whoever else. Steven Lorentz still needs a contract. I believe that'll get done. So I'm actually going to co-sign it. And then this is the number one priority of the summer. So getting it done sooner rather than later just makes sense. So I'll co-sign it, yes.
Beautiful. Because, I'd rather not have to go too far into the offseason to wonder when is that deal going to get done.
Well, I'll throw one right back at you. Cosign, no sign. If that deal doesn't get done, Matthew Knies will receive an offer sheet.
I think he will receive one, depending on what type of offer sheet it is. Real debate is if he'll sign one, but I do think that he will. I think he would definitely be one of the top players to be offered one if the Leafs are not able to get a deal done quick.
Let me see what the offer sheet tiers are going to be this year, because with the cap going up, it does shift the tiers a little bit. So I'm of the belief, like I personally think that a contract comparable, we talked about it a couple days ago or last week. I have Matt Boldy's contract as a good comparable. He's making 7x7. If you include percentage of cap and you add that to the upcoming salary cap increase, instead of 7x7, you're looking at about $8 million as an AAV, an annual average value for Matthew Knies. So if we're talking about maybe an $8 million contract is what the Leafs might be able to settle in, you would think that a team would have to go above and beyond that to really push Knies to signing that and scaring the Leafs into balking at that contract. So you're probably looking closer into like the 10-ish range before the Maple Leafs even think about not signing that offer sheet. And at that point, it would cost the team 2 firsts, a second, and a third round pick to make that happen. And I'm not sure that teams are going to be willing to unload that type of capital for Matthew Knies. Like, he's a good player, don't get me wrong. But you look at last year when both Holloway and Broberg got offer sheeted, it was only in like, what would they cost him? A second and a third round pick. I think it was a second rounder for Broberg and a third round pick for Holloway. That's a big difference from giving up 2 firsts, a second, and a third for somebody, and also having to pay him $10 million over the next however many years of that contract. So I'm becoming a little less scared of the offer sheet, just because of how much it would cost, and I don't know if teams would be willing to pay that type of compensation. If it's just a $9 million and $8 million deal, I think Toronto signs it. So I wouldn't be worried about that at that point.
Yeah, I'm not worried, but I do know that if they want to get a better sense of what they got to work with this offseason, it's a big ticket that they're going to have to figure out. Maybe they'll have a range that they feel they can work with, but it's always better to just have it done and just out of sight. Well, not out of sight, but just in place.
I just thought of like worst case scenario for the Maple Leafs this summer.
Uh-oh.
You don't sign Marner, he leaves. You don't sign Tavares, he leaves. They both end up signing, and you don't have Knies signed by July 1 either. He gets offer sheeted, and it's a number you're not all that comfortable with. Like, and you let him walk. Imagine losing out on all 3 of those players. That would be worst case scenario for
them. You gotta be like that, man.
I'm just saying. But honestly, yeah, that would be a terrible situation for this Toronto team if that were to happen.
If you think people are being insufferable about the potential Mitch Marner leaving for nothing, at least, I mean, you wouldn't lose Matthew Knies for nothing, but oh man, yeah, you really open up some wounds, potential wounds with that one.
Yeah, I'm not like we said, I'm expecting a contract before the draft. I think it comes soon, but it was just hypothetical. If it's not done, is there a worry for an offer sheet? And yeah, there could be, but it's the money it would take to offer sheet a guy like Knies may scare off some teams from doing it. Is pretty well where I'm at. All right, we'll take another break. We'll come back. We'll continue with some cosign, no sign on the other side. It's Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. The Locked On Leafs podcast continues. Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti with you. We're continuing some cosign, no sign. We're both making statements to each other. We're either going to cosign it or no sign it, depending on if we agree or disagree. Dave, you got the next one.
All right. So I want to give you my league one first, because there's some rumblings going on right now that a Chris Kreider trade could be in the work. Well, it is in the works, but I think there's a few things that are maybe waiting to happen before a deal is struck with the Anaheim Ducks, according to Frank Saravalli. But I'm thinking if this Cup final continues to drag along, we're going to see multiple trades happen before the Cup is awarded.
Was it in the middle of the Cup final that
it was
Boston
literally
traded
right?
Hallmark?
It was literally right before Game 7.
Yeah,
I know because I was
literally-
working that night, and I hated the Senators so much for that one.
Yeah. So we saw last year where it's like, hey, we got to get this thing going. Our off season started weeks ago. We got to get going here. So yeah, I'll co-sign that because, like you mentioned, there's already a reported deal in place. So that's one trade, I suppose. Sounds like Chris Kreider is going to end up in Anaheim, which, depending on if there's any money retention there, it's a lot of money that the Anaheim Ducks will be spending on Chris Kreider, which, not that it will take them out of the Marner running, but definitely, might make it less likely that they offer the reported $14 million that James Myrtle wrote about the other day. But yeah, I think there'll be another trade of some kind, especially if this thing ends up going 7 games. We'll see another one. I'll co-sign it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we heard the name with Jason Robertson's name also reportedly being out there. Did you hear?
I did not hear that.
Okay, so Elliot Friedman, it's been kind of a couple people have said it. I think Saravalli said it, but Friedman was on today and he said like the Stars could look to move Jason Robertson, and you're gonna love to hear this, if they can't move one of Lyubushkin or Dumba in order to allow them to sign Granlund.
Wait.
So here's how exactly how he said. Jason Robertson's name is out there. Could be moved to make room for a Granlund extension if Dumba or Lyubushkin can't be shipped out.
Mikael Granlund? They're choosing Mikael Granlund over Jason Robertson?
Yep.
The Dallas. Has Jim Nill lost his mind?
A little bit.
What the hell is going on over there? First, you got the coach doing stupid stuff, and now you got the GM thinking about doing even dumber stuff.
Yeah, see, Jim Nill's really good at they're really good at drafting and developing guys, but sometimes when it comes to the bringing guys in, it hasn't really worked out too well for them. Like, here's the thing: I know that Robertson has
Nico Rantanen might have a different.
Yeah, but part of the reason now too is they feel like Robertson's a bit expendable because you got a Rantanen, and Robertson has, I think this is the last year of his deal coming up. So
I don't think he's a UFA already, though, is he?
No, and that's the part that I don't understand. Is he's an RFA? So are you worried that you're not going to be able to afford him, and so maybe you just get ahead of it and you try to, trade him while maybe he's still got some. Although he had really not so great year in terms of what we had seen in the back. Like 80 points is good, but the playoffs were not good for him. And I feel like that may have hurt his value a little bit.
Possibly. I still think that there's a lot of teams that would bring on a Jason Robertson, Toronto included, especially if Marner walks. But to frame it in that way, I could understand if they're like, we're probably not going to be able to sign him next year, so let's get something for him, similarly to what Calgary did with Matt Tkachuk, right? Tkachuk wasn't going to re-sign, so they said, all right, well, we'll get something for you. The Toronto Maple Leafs did not do that with Mitch Marner, but that's neither here nor there. So I could see them maybe doing that or framing it that way. But to say in order to free up money for Mikael Granlund, that is a choice.
Very much a choice.
All right. Here's one for you that I've been really thinking about this recently. Calle Jarnkrok deserves to return to Toronto next season. I do not view him as a buyout candidate.
I don't, but I also saying if he's on your fourth line again, like what are we doing here? Like he can't be a fourth line guy if you're bringing him back.
Why?
Because you can't have a guy making over $2 million on your fourth line. Like, you can't have too many of those guys. Like,
really? let me go and take a peek at what some of these players on the Florida Panthers and Edmonton Oilers are making on the fourth line. Keep going.
Yeah, I just like again, he's a good defensive player. He's not losing as many of the minutes that he is playing. I do get it, but I personally think that spending 2.1 million on a fourth line winger when you have other needs and you could use that money a little bit better, I just don't see it as a worthwhile spending of money. Let's just say, like Florida, yes, do they have guys in their bottom six making over that? Yeah, but they don't have that many, especially on that fourth line. It kind of feels like that's part of the reason why when you're talking about, I wouldn't say he was a passenger, but like you expected more out of Calle Jarnkrok. I understand he was out and he was dealing with that injury, but you're paid to produce. You got to produce, and we've seen him do it in the past. So unless he's, coming back this season healthy, and that's the other problem, is if he's not healthy, you're stuck kind of in what you can do because you don't have as much cap space, and that's what they've had the issue with in the past as well.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, or you could just kind of LTIR him like you did for a majority of the year. But you mentioned guys in the bottom six who are making too much money, I guess. Like Victor Arvidsson's making $4 million, right? This is a guy who hasn't really made a big splash in Edmonton. He's been fourth line for Edmonton for a little bit. Adam Henrique has been playing bottom 6 minutes on, at times as the 4C out in that city. Connor Brown made $4 million. I mean, he's kind of been floating around. Jeff Skinner has been a healthy scratch. He's making $3 million for the Edmonton Oilers. Like, you look at them defensively, they've got some guys making some cake, like Jake Wallman's making 3.4. You got Darnell Nurse making 9.25. Like, I don't know. There's some guys who are making quite a bit of money, if we're being honest, down in the bottom end of the roster. Like Florida, like you've got who's out there? Anton Lundell's a third liner. He's making $5 million. Like that's a player making a decent chunk of change. Brad Marchand's on your third line, quote unquote, making money like that. E2 Luosterainen, third liner, making $3 million. So I think 2.1, especially with the cap going up like it is, I don't think it's that much money. I don't think you can have your entire fourth line making that much, but one guy, I mean, we saw what that lineup looked like. Him, Lorentz, and Lawton in the postseason. Pretty solid shutdown line. I wouldn't mind bringing that back as a fourth line for the Maple Leafs next season. I really wouldn't.
Yeah, but someone's got to produce offensively on that line. They can't, like, you have to. You brought up Lundell, you brought up Marchand, you brought up Luosterainen. Those guys all produce.
Jeff Carter, Victor Arvidsson, those guys aren't producing.
Jeff Carter.
Sorry, Jeff Skinner.
Okay, well, Jeff Skinner, that's just an abomination of a move by the Oilers. That move, but it's not.
I'm just saying, you're saying you can't be a winning team with having 2.1 million on your fourth line. They got $3 million up in the press box.
Well, that's just because, yeah. But I mean, if he's playing, I guarantee that he's not going to be playing bottom six either, though, because the only way he would have gone back in the line was he was playing in the top six, from what I saw. But like, he brought up Connor Brown. The guy has 5 goals and 8 points in this playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
Not bad production for a guy playing. I don't know, but I don't think he's a fourth line guy for them. Like, that's the thing. You brought up some names. Not all those guys are playing fourth line. I don't even know if Victor Arvidsson's playing the fourth line. Is he?
Yeah, according to Daily Faceoff, Victor Arvidsson's on the fourth line. Brown's on the third line. Henry, third line, I guess. Matthias Janmark also on the fourth line.
Yeah, but then they get like guys like Hyman who are, and that are not making as much. Nugent Hopkins is not making as much for what they do. Mm-hmm. That's kind of like they're only paying really 3 guys a lot of money: Nurse, McDavid, and Draisaitl.
Yeah, I just like Jarnkrok's a guy who can play up and down your lineup. He can play second power play. He can play on the penalty kill. If he's healthy, he's proven that he can be at least an effective player in the NHL. He is an NHLer, that's for sure. And he has scored 20 goals. He has a decent shot. So I think if he gets a full off season, right? To get himself back up to full speed. Like he jumped on a moving train this year. That's difficult to do.
Yeah.
I think that he could be a very serviceable bottom six player for Toronto. And I don't think that 2.1 is not nearly as detrimental to the 2025-26 cap. Like you're talking about 95 million is the cap. Like it's really not all that much. 2.1. That's under 2. If you were to sign him at that same cap percentage that he signed a couple years ago, it'd be under 2 million in like a modern,
He's
day
got
look at it.
he's got to find a way to stay healthy then. Like if you're going to be if
Sure,
you're
of course,
keeping him,
of course.
that's it for me. Like it just felt like he was there. He was doing good defensively, but you got to find guys that can produce offensively. The Leafs' issue, other than games 5 and 7, wasn't really defense. It was who the heck is scoring for you, and that's why I'm saying like if you're gonna pay a guy like him that much, he's got to pot a couple of goals at least. Like give a little more than what he's giving.
Yeah, and you can make that argument for everybody realistically. I think everyone kind of didn't pull their weight there. I mean, Bobby McMahon didn't really get anything going offensively. I don't think he
I've
scored a
heard
single
his name
goal.
as people are looking at moving him too, right? Like if a team
Oh,
is
it's ridiculous. Like, why? What are you moving him for? He's making peanuts, is he not?
yeah, he is. And like but people are like, well, go get like guys who maybe aren't, you know, either are having a hard time staying healthy or just not producing in the crunch time. Kind of get rid of those guys and bring in new guys. It's like, well, you can't turn over a whole team either. You
Yeah.
need to at some point also put a little investment and hoping the core is going to rebound. Like some guys are going to rebound a bit.
Oh, that has to happen. Like you can talk about what you want to tinker with your third, fourth line all you want. If Matthews is only going to score 3 goals in 13 games, you're toast. Like you're toast. Like they're lucky they got to a game 7 with that type of production from Austin Matthews, if we're being quite completely honest with ourselves. So yeah, the top end of the roster clearly has to produce way more, and that is the ultimate conversation. But yeah, for me, I wouldn't be upset. I would not be upset if they, ran it back with Calle Jarnkrok next year, found a way to get Steven Lorenz signed to a nice deal, and you got a fourth line already figured out with Jarnkrok, Lawton, and Lorenz, and you know that they have an identity. And look, although they didn't score in the playoffs, there is history of those guys scoring, right? Lawton has a history of being able to come up with 15 to 20 goals. Jarnkrok scored 20 goals his first year in Toronto. Lorenz has scored, he scored like 10 or 12 goals a couple of years ago. There's a history there. They just didn't get it. It just didn't happen in the playoffs. The expected goals were very high. They were getting their chances. They just weren't finishing. You could look at bad puck luck for some of that. You play those games again, those opportunities again, those breakaways again. Usually maybe 7 out of 10 times that goes in. They just happen to be those 3 times out of 10 in those moments and situations. So I wouldn't be worried about the Maple Leafs and their cap situation if Jarnkrok returns to the team. Camp, different story. But we can have that conversation another day.
Get out of here. Like I'm okay if they sell them for pennies on the dollar.
Yeah, like we're talking about the most inefficient and maybe that's a conversation for tomorrow. Like the most inefficient contracts that the Maple Leafs have right now. He's probably going to be close to the top of the list. I would say him and probably Morgan Riley, for being completely honest.
We will have that conversation.
But we can have that conversation at some point. Again, we got weeks to go until the off season truly begins, and we can still have these conversations. But that'll do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti, and follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs. We'll be back with another episode for you guys tomorrow. Until then, keep locked right here on Locked On Leafs.